Welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figure that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. We're for a quick one today because it's a little bit later in the afternoon than normal. And also, there is a good chance that by the time we come back for either an MLB trade deadline show, which would be Thursday, or a regularly scheduled show on Friday, things could change. I'm going to give you as many updates as I can from across as many different interviews and media hits as we've seen today across a couple of radio stations, plus some of the national media stuff about what's going on around the Phillies. But I put out on Twitter on Wednesday morning something to the extent of like, I think that today and tomorrow are going to effectively dictate the way that we view Dave Dombrowski's tenure with the Philadelphia Phillies. There have been signings. There have been moves made. Many of his trade deadlines have been underwhelming, to say the very least. But they are now at a real crossroads, are the Phillies. And I think that they're in a place where we kind of hoped they wouldn't be. I think that we all kind of hoped that the Phillies were going to be a much more proactive team. I think that we had hoped that the Phillies were going to be a more proactive team in the offseason. I think that we've, quite frankly, expected that that was going to be the case going into this season, that they were going to address the bullpen, they were going to address the outfield, and they really didn't, right? Jordan Romano, they took a flyer on. It didn't work. Most notably, Max Kepler has been a disastrous signing for the team. They have put themselves effectively behind the eight ball because they didn't address holes in their roster that we all knew were there last season, even around the trade deadline, this offseason, going into spring training, even the first half of the season. We all knew that these holes existed. The front office did nothing to really address them in a meaningful way. And now it sounds like the Phillies are kind of being held over a barrel. And in fairness, I don't blame the vast majority of teams who are going to try to negotiate with the Phillies for holding them over that barrel. They are negotiating from a point of strength and a place of strength. They are very well aware that Philadelphia's owner, John Middleton, expects results. They are very keenly aware of the fact that Phillies fans on the whole expect results. And so there's a lot of pressure on Dave Dombrowski right now. To this point, he has, in my fair estimation, kind of wilted under that pressure. But we need to see what's going to happen. So I don't want to hold everything against him. I don't want to say that this is going to be a failure of a trade deadline. But based on some of the comments I'm seeing, based on some of the reporting that I've seen today, I don't have a lot of faith that the Phillies are going to get actual deals done that are going to matter. And I'm looking to see, there was a little bit of an update on Duran going from the Twins, that he might be going to the Dodgers. And it doesn't look like this officially gone through yet. But the amount of players right now that the Phillies have apparently been in on, and it hasn't like actually come to fruition, is pretty wild. And Andrew Painter right now sounds like he better be the best pitcher any of us have ever seen. Because at this point, you're watching teams like the Dodgers going after Duran. We've heard that they've been in on Miller and that the asking price has been Painter as well. At this point, it just kind of stinks. I'm going to go to this most recent tweet from Bob Nightingale. I believe this is his most recent one. Let me just double check it real quick. Yeah. So this is about a half hour ago as of recording from Bob Nightingale. You can decide that Bob Nightingale is a bastion of journalistic integrity. You can have the argument about whether or not he kind of throws things out a little bit prematurely. But let's go out to this tweet from Nightingale. I'll expand this for all of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Those of you listening in the podcast feed after the fact, bless your hearts. We love and appreciate you. From Nightingale, the Minnesota Twins are expected to trade their closer, Duran, by the end of the day with the Dodgers in strong pursuit. The Twins have also been in heavy discussions with the Phillies, but have not lowered their asking price of prize pitching prospect Andrew Painter. And so you might be having this conversation internally. You might be having this conversation in group chats and with family members. Are the Phillies blowing it? I don't know. To me, there's no bona fide stud closer right now on the market under contract for a considerable period of time who's at an age that it kind of aligns with this quote that, John Middleton put out 2 weekends ago where he said, we have to keep in mind that there are teams 5 to 10 years from now that we're going to have to be able to field. And, you can't necessarily go all in on a single player. As of right now, as I mentioned, Andrew Painter better be the best pitching prospect this team has put out in decades, because I will continue to go back to the Carlos Carrascos of the world, who, by the way, on this day, the Phillies traded for Cliff Lee. Carlos Carrasco is probably the most notable name in that trade from the Phillies side of things. And if you remember, they didn't really want to trade Carrasco, and they ultimately did, and Cliff Lee paid dividends for them. There was a name, Kyle Drabek, that I've brought up on this show a lot in recent weeks. That Drabek was supposed to be a bona fide ace, stud, number one guy. They didn't want to part with him for Roy Halladay the same year that they ended up with Cliff Lee. Eventually, they did part with Drabek to get Roy Halladay. Andrew Painter might be amazing. He might be the best pitching prospect to come through this organization since Cole Hamels, right? You can make a case, if you want to, that Aaron Nola, multi-time opening day starter, a guy who had some Cy Young consideration a few years ago, maybe he's the best pitching prospect, whatever. Painter, even in my estimation, right? Even if I say I think Andrew Painter could be a very good player, maybe he could be a number one pitcher, and for a long time for this team, I'm not necessarily in love with the idea of trading a potential number one starter to go out and get a closer, but I will just bring up the fact that, this bullpen situation getting as bad as it has was kind of avoidable. And Estevez, who they traded for last year, could they have brought him back on a somewhat affordable deal and maybe tried to run it back in maybe a full camp, right, with this team, full spring training, full season with the Phillies? Maybe he would have had more success, maybe not. But you had him. You got him last year. I would have been fine with that. He was a proven guy with the Angels. I didn't hate the player. But it just kind of feels like right now, everybody that the Phillies are in on, every player that they're in on, the asking price is Andrew Painter. And again, I don't blame other GMs for asking for Andrew Painter. It makes all the sense in the world. Why would you not try to get this potential ace out of the Phillies? It's just, this is why when you don't make moves in the offseason and you get up against it at the deadline, teams are just going to keep asking for your best player, your best prospect. And I will point out today that Andrew Painter had a really good start today. And so people are, getting themselves kind of hyped up. This is why you don't trade Andrew Painter. 6 1/3 innings pitched, 7 hits allowed, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. He threw 103 pitches, 65 for strikes. There have been some really great signs of him pitching in the minors. There have been a few starts that have kind of raised some eyebrows. There have been some issues giving up the long ball. Kind of sounds like Aaron Nola. But man, it just feels like the Phillies, by virtue of not being more aggressive in the offseason, have screwed themselves, because ultimately they're going to probably have to part with at least one prospect they don't want to. Is that going to be an Aiden Miller? Is that going to be an Andrew Painter? Is it going to be a Justin Crawford? Will it be multiple of those players just to try to get a good bullpen arm in? Oh, and by the way, there are those lingering sentiments out there. Oh, maybe Jesus Luzardo could be a bullpen arm. Right? You could convert him to the bullpen for the playoffs, and that's a heck of an addition. And if Aaron Nola comes back and is even remotely close to being a number 2 kind of starter, well, great. Maybe you could even think about putting Ranger Suarez in the bullpen. I'm sorry, I hate the fact that we have to keep bringing these points back up week in and week out, but that is the only, it seems like, idea that this organization has right now, and it's not good, and it's not great. It's a legitimate problem, and Dave Dombrowski, for all the years that he's been in Major League Baseball and has been trusted to lead some really good franchises, it is just mind-boggling to me that a guy who has been almost notorious in the past for parting ways, kind of burning down farm systems to try to go for it, the fact that he hasn't done it to this point to me is just kind of insane. And again, you better hope Andrew Painter is going to be an incredible player, because here's the real issue, okay? And I brought this up last week, and I will continue to bang this drum between now and tomorrow. And Video Guy Amadeo, who I see is over in the comment section, you can get ready to clip this one up. But this is true. Dave Dombrowski right now, without any question, going into the 2025 MLB trade deadline, is at a very critical point in his tenure with this organization. He has the ability to make one move, whether it's for a bullpen arm, for an actual bat that can be consistent in this lineup, for an actual outfielder, or maybe somebody to play first base if they're good enough. Harper has already said that he'll go back to the outfield. if you're Dave Dombrowski, have one opportunity to make a move to fortify this roster and make them a World Series contender. And if you don't, your inactivity at this trade deadline, compounded with the fact that Kyle Schwarber could leave in free agency, Ranger Suarez could leave in free agency, this could be the magnum opus of shit for Dave Dombrowski and his tenure with the Phillies. This could be, these decisions, these missed opportunities could essentially be the thing that years from now, when we talk about Dave Dombrowski, we think of the missed opportunities the same way that if you ask any Phillies fan, what do you remember about Ruben Amaro's tenure as GM of this team? Virtually everyone will say he traded Cliff Lee. Not he traded for Cliff Lee, not he was part of the front office that got Roy Halladay. No, it's always he traded Cliff Lee. He screwed us. He prevented us from having an incredible rotation that could have continued, had another World Series appearance in 2010, would have had another year together going into 2011. He's the guy who traded Cliff Lee. Dave Dombrowski, if he is inactive or he goes out and he makes marginal moves at the deadline, we're going to look back at the 2025 season and say, oh yeah, Dave Dombrowski's the idiot who didn't bring back Kyle Schwarber, who didn't bring back Ranger Suarez, and who screwed the pooch at the deadline. That is a legitimate issue. And to me, this is a legacy moment for Dave Dombrowski. This isn't just your average trade deadline. It's not. In years past, you could make the case, all right, Dombrowski's been here. They've gotten Harper, they've gotten Schwarber, Castellanos, Trey Turner, all big signings, all big names, all big money contracts. That's true. You've had a little bit of latitude. You've had a little bit of the ability to say, all right, these guys are under contract for a bunch more years, and if we don't make, franchise-altering moves, we don't blow up the farm system for a guy here and there, we can get by. The fact that Schwarber is out of contract at the end of the year should kind of scare you. The fact that Castellanos is coming up on the end of his contract, a year from now, should be a little bit concerning. The fact that Bryce Harper, I can't imagine is going to play at an MVP level 4 years from now should be a concern. The fact that JT Realmuto's out of contract at the end of the year, also another concern. At some point, you have to decide, are we trying to push some chips in here and maximize the end of some of these guys' runs with the team, or are you now going to essentially tell the fan base, yeah, we were close, yeah, we could have probably made a run to the NLCS, maybe to the World Series if we added a piece or two at the deadline or in the offseason, which we failed to do. Yeah, we could have done that, but instead, we did some half measures. We ultimately got bounced early in the playoffs, but hey, there's 5 to 10 years from now. I'm sorry, it's a really hard thing to sell the fan base on. You're going to have a lot of fans burning out and kind of flaming out and likely going out on this team until the fall if you don't make a move. And so we now have to go to where John Middleton is, because John Middleton went on the record with some actual comments, some meaningful comments about Kyle Schwarber. And so I'm going to kind of bounce around here today. I'll try to get to the comments as much as I can. I'm going to pop the comments up right down here. There have already been a bunch in here. Like Hexram says, hi, Russ. Love you, Russ. Hello, Hexram. Amadeus here. Says it's John Middleton's fault. Connor Buss is here for the first time live in a few weeks. Says Team Wawa, but got to stop at the Sheets the other weekend. Appetizer sampler, 10 out of 10. Bless your heart, Connor Buss. Catholic Nono says Dave Dombrowski's personnel genius is greatly overrated. His additions over the past 2 seasons have been abysmal. Let's see. There's some other stuff here. Jamie Rollo says you don't trade Painter for a reliever. Catholic Nono calls out the Romanos, Kepler, Joe Ross, Taiwan Walker, Austin Hayes. Serious overpayments for less than mediocrity. They have not added anyone who can help the core. Brutal. Absolutely brutal stuff. JH says they screwed it up last year by doing nothing but run it back after they got knocked out in the NLDS. Ford likes the magnum opus of shit. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Mr. Holland's opus, really. And Hexram says, Middleton scared in 2 years. It's going to be like a ghost town in Citizens Bank Park. Seems like Johnny spent more money than he wanted to. JH says he's going to screw the pooch. And my best memories of him will be when he was mentioned in Moneyball. Peter Tom Willis is here on YouTube, says, no prospect should beat off limits. I'll trade a chip for 5 years of bad baseball. I think most people find themselves there. Now, I want to get out to the Middleton comments, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we need to jump around to, including some of the other rumors that the Phillies are in, including some of the national media people who've been kind of factored into all of this. Jason Stark had John Middleton on his show on Starkville. And so I'm going to play a clip here because Middleton talking about Schwarber starts to make you question how in lockstep the organization is, and especially I floated this idea that now again, I haven't talked to anybody, right? I'm just a guy. I think that there's a possibility here that the Phillies not getting something done earlier than this might have rubbed Schwarber and his camp the wrong way. I want you to hear what Middleton has to say because he thinks that there's a little bit of trouble. Let's go over to John Middleton with Jason Stark. We'll kind of interject here a couple of times.
How much does he mean to your team, and how big a priority is it to keep him with the Phillies going forward as he heads into free agency?
He and him refers to Kyle Schwarber. All right, here's Middleton.
Huge. You've heard Dave make public statements. Dave doesn't do that very often. But he said, we need him, we want him, we love him.
We need him, we want him, we love him. Why is he not signed? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why is he not signed? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why is he not signed? I'll ask these things in threes. Maybe it's like Beetlejuice. Maybe John Middleton will just pop up in my office here, and he'll be able to give me an answer. Maybe Dave Dombrowski will. We need him, we want him, we love him. Why is he not signed? Okay, let's keep going.
Dave came to me and said, look, we have the opportunity to sign this guy. He makes a difference in the clubhouse. He makes a difference on the field, in the dugout. And what I've learned is he makes a difference in the community, too. He's dedicated to...
Okay, so he's a very good player. He's very good in the clubhouse. He's very good in the community. We need him. We love him. We want him. We need him. We want him. We love him. Why is he not signed?
His Heroes Foundation and first responders. And he's a wonderful person as well as a wonderful player. So we want to keep him. And we will do it.
We want to keep him. We need him. We want him. We love him. Okay.
Everything we can to keep him. And that doesn't mean we're going to be able to, but
we're going to do everything we can to keep him. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to.
Guarantee you, we're going to go down swinging. No one should question our sincerity in wanting to and what we will do in order to keep him.
So we shouldn't question their sincerity
as he heads into free agency.
But huge. You've heard Dave make public statements.
Let's just go back to this
Dave
again.
Doesn't do that very often.
Okay.
But he said, we need him, we want him, we love him.
We need him, we want him, we love him. Say it with me, class. We need him, we want him, we love him. Don't question the sincerity of the organization. They're going to do everything they can to bring him back. Why isn't he brought back? They're going to do everything they can to bring Kyle Schwarber back. Why did you go into this past offseason without him under contract beyond 2025? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why was he not signed this offseason? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why was he not signed during spring training? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why wasn't he signed during the first half of the season? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why is he not signed ahead of the trade deadline? We need him, we want him, we love him. Why are you going to go into the offseason with Kyle Schwarber unsigned hitting free agency? There's cognitive dissonance here, right? Your words and your actions are saying two different things. We need him, we want him, we love him. We're going to do everything in our power to keep him, but it doesn't mean we're going to be able to. We're going to go down swinging if we don't get him. We need him, we want him, we love him would imply that you have every intention of bringing him back because you value the human being and the player, and yet he's not signed, and then you're saying, well, he's really important to us on the field and in the community. We're going to have to, we're going to go down swinging if we don't get him. We're going to try to keep him. Why isn't he signed? This whole topic, right? Kyle Schwarber's impending free agency is a cloud. Whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not, it is a legitimate cloud that is over this team. Bryce Harper has had to address it in the locker room, right? In the clubhouse, saying, if there's anybody who deserves to be here, it's Kyle Schwarber. He's critical to our room. For a team that has run it back year after year talking about the vibes of the team, how is Kyle Schwarber not signed beyond 2025? If the vibes mattered enough that Garrett Stubbs was your backup catcher, maybe when he shouldn't have been, just in terms of production, for at least a season, if Stubbs was that important to have a roster spot, seems like a nice guy, lovely guy, not putting him down. But if he was that important, how do you not have Kyle Schwarber signed beyond 2025? Which then leads to the question, does Kyle Schwarber not like being here? I can't imagine that's the case. But is it possible that Schwarber and his team tried to negotiate, again in good faith, going into the 2025 season, maybe Dave Dombrowski thought that he could get a better price for Kyle Schwarber. And maybe they lowballed Schwarber. And now all of a sudden, Schwarber and his team says, all right, you know what? Best and final is this. If you're not going to even be remotely in the ballpark, we'll take this to 2025, 26 into the offseason. We'll go to free agency. And maybe Dombrowski tried to call that bluff. And it certainly appears as though this is heading toward a free agent discussion where the price on Schwarber will likely be higher than it would have been if you had signed him to an extension over the last year or so. And so this feels like a failed negotiation. So you have this cloud looming, and at the same time, you are less than 24 hours away from the trade deadline hitting, where it feels like, once again, you screwed up by not filling holes in the offseason, and now you are being held over a barrel with a double-barrel shotgun to the back of your head, and teams are asking for Andrew Painter, or they're going to paint the inside of the barrel with what was supposed to be a good baseball mind. All right? Like, it ain't good. It's not great if you're the Phillies. It feels like Dave Dombrowski has kind of messed this thing up. And I don't know how anybody could feel any other way. So as Ford has put here in the comments, we need him. We love him. We need him. I might make that into a shirt. Maybe I should put John Middleton's face, Kyle Schwarber's stats. We need him. We want him. We love him. Then why isn't he signed? Call and response, friends. Okay, so that's Middleton on Schwarber. And in the midst of all of this happening, here's another part that I find deeply concerning. We're just going to keep this going. Now, again, the point of today's show isn't to be super-duper negative, okay? But, it's important to point out that, again, for the team that's all about vibes, this very veteran locker room is keeping an eye on what's going on with the trade deadline. And so we're going to go over to Jim Salisbury, because Jim Salisbury was on WIP's morning show. And there's a very, very concerning thing that Salisbury brought up about how the veterans are looking at the importance of this trade deadline. Because again, make no mistake, this could be the last half a season with Kyle Schwarber. It could be the last half season with JT Realmuto. You never know what's going to happen with Castellanos. A lot of these guys probably looking around going, all right, we have the talent. Is Dave Dombrowski going to do anything to fortify this roster? Let's hear what Jim Salisbury had to say, long-time respected insider over at NBC Sports Network. Let's hear what Jim Salisbury has to say.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. The players that I talk to, they want to see a move made. They want to see a move made. They'd like to see a bat come in. They'd like to see a big arm come in. They are watching this thing really closely, and there'll be some very disappointed veterans if there's not significant improvement made.
Okay, so run that back a second. The veterans have an eye on what's happening. They want to see a big bat. They want to see a bullpen arm. Don't we all? Bless their hearts. If no movement is made, if no move is made, if no player of significance is brought in, there are going to be some very disappointed veterans. Bryce Harper is going to be upset. Zach Wheeler is going to be upset. Those are two guys on my team I'm actively trying not to piss off. Now, again, if Andrew Painter is the stumbling block in all of this, if Andrew Painter is the one thing you're not willing to give up, and that is going to be the asking price for any bullpen arm of significance or any bat of significance, again, this was mismanagement by the front office to get to this point. And again, Andrew Painter better be a damn good pitcher if he's going to be the reason that you don't make a move to fortify a team that actually does look like they could have a shot to make a World Series this year. I've been very on the fence. I don't think they have the killer instinct again. We talk about this, the inability for them to complete sweeps, the inability for them to put teams out of their misery, right? This is the same conversation we had a year ago. It was often about the Mets and about the Braves. You could put your foot on their throat, can kind of end it. That Phillies team didn't have the killer instinct. This one, I'm still not sure really does. I think that's more of a locker room vibe thing. I just don't think they have killers on this team where they maybe need them, and that's okay. It can be okay. If you're trying to win a championship, you need at least a couple of guys who are just kind of willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, and I'm not sure this locker room really does. You add somebody to that locker room who could make sense, and then maybe you get over the hump. Now, That's the disappointed vets. There is also a thought out there, and I mentioned Duran earlier, that the Twins and the Phillies have had conversations around Duran, but that's not exactly what it appears they're going to be able to get. Now, Nightingale mentioned the Phillies, along with the Dodgers, as being in hot pursuit of Duran. Jason Stark, who we heard from earlier in the show, he went on 97.5's Midday Show, and he's talking about a totally different reliever from the Twins, being more the Phillies' speed because the Phillies won't part with Andrew Painter. Let's go out to Stark with 97.5. Which reliever could the Phillies maybe be interested in?
It correctly, what they're shopping for is barely available. I know this would be surprising to people. I honestly think that their top target has become Griffin Jacks.
Griffin Jacks, not a bad bullpen arm. More of a setup guy, not a closer, not the kind of guy that you want to be able to bring in a high leverage situation in the ninth inning and close out a win, but okay, setup guy, not bad. Does that get people excited? I don't know.
It's actually the setup man for Johan Duran in Minnesota, but it really doesn't sound like they want to trade him. He's got 2.5 years of control, and if they trade Johan Duran, then it sounds to me like they're being asked for Andrew Painter. Okay?
So, if the Twins' starting price, right, for either Duran or for Griffin is Andrew Painter, like, again, you're being held to the same kind of ridiculous ask, but you put yourself in this position. It's really frustrating. Like, do we all feel the same frustration? I have to imagine that we do. Now, here's maybe the one little bit of positivity that can come out of what could be a very disappointing 24 hours here if you're a Phillies fan. Bryce Harper has reiterated, apparently, his willingness to play the outfield if it means the Phillies are going to bring in an impact bat. So let's just say, hypothetically, the Phillies are checking in on Miller with the A's, or checking in on Duran. Maybe they're checking in on other relievers, and the cost is just going to be Andrew Painter, and they're not willing to go there. The good news, and this comes by courtesy of WIP's Midday Show, they had Todd Zielecki on, and Zielecki kind of dove into something that he had reported, and they give a little bit of context here about Bryce Harper's willingness to potentially move from first base back to the outfield for the right player. So let's go over to Zielecki.
Did say to him, because as I was talking to him about this, remember, he went
He's
to
talking about a conversation with Harper.
Said, I will go to the outfield if you can get the right guy. And that right guy was Pete Alonso in the offseason. Talked to him again about it in spring training. Said, yeah, that offer is still on the table. So as I circled back to him on Monday.
So if you have a hard time with some of the audio here, because it was on the phone, on the radio, he brought up Suarez about going out and getting Suarez and bringing him in. That would send Harper to the outfield. And then they were talking about the past offseason. The idea was like Pete Alonso would play first, and then Harper would be willing to go back to the outfield. So he brought that line of questioning back up, and Zielecki's the one who mentioned Suarez's name because Harper technically on the record said Suarez's name, and people were like, oh, does that mean he has insight about who the Phillies are trying to get? All that. All right, let's keep going.
He said, I just want to make sure, is that offer still on the table? And he said, yes. And we were talking about it, and I said, you're probably not going to do it for just anybody. I said, obviously, like a guy like Suarez would be a guy you would move out to left field for, consider a position change. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And that's why he mentioned him by name, because I first mentioned Suarez by name. But, he did add in there, he's like, Dave's not going to ask me to move unless we get the right guy. And
all right, we'll finish this. Go ahead.
Right guy, I think, in the minds of everybody is a big right-handed bat or just a bat that you can fit into the middle of the lineup to hit behind Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. And Suarez is really the guy.
So Zielecki's in on Suarez, thinks that would be the perfect fit. The name Steven Kwan's been out there, a guy who doesn't strike out a lot, gets on base a lot. I think he's hitting 286 this season. Doesn't have power numbers to speak of. He's just an on-base guy. He gets himself on base. He's a good hitter. And again, he doesn't strike out. Kind of like one of those guys that, like, if I'm looking at what does this lineup really need, it's somebody who can be kind of like slump proof. It's kind of somebody who can still get on base when like some of these bigger hitters, these bigger name guys in the lineup start to go cold in October, you want to have a guy like Kwan who can get on base, who can keep things going, who can maybe cause a little bit of havoc on the base paths, or can at the very least put a little bit of pressure on, right? If he can hit into the gap and you have a runner in scoring position, it puts a little added pressure on the pitcher to make a perfect pitch. And if you start overthinking it, that's when you make mistakes over the plate to Schwarber and to Harper and to Real Muto, and to some extent Castellanos. I don't really care who they get, but I think they need somebody. And it's good, I guess, to know that the biggest name on the team, the highest paid player on the team, Bryce Harper, is willing to potentially move to the outfield if Dombrowski is able to get that guy. Now, I'm going to go out to the comments here really quick to see where people are at, because I saw JH, I think, is referring to Middleton. Wow. JH called Middleton a penny-pinching grandpa. Is going to let him walk, and he's going to blame Dave for it. Writing is on the wall. Wow. Holy shamoly. Landros, too, says, I'd trade Painter and another stud prospect for Duran, but would want Buxton included somehow, make it a blockbuster. Yeah, I mean, that fills both needs. I think if you're going to trade Painter, you need to have a position player coming back, preferably an outfielder who fits a need, and a bullpen arm. That's kind of where maybe Painter enters the conversation. Hexram says Mets will be in on Schwarber, I bet. I have that feeling. I won't forgive you if that happens, Johnny boy. And Middleton will lose a lot of equity he's built up with the fan base if Schwarber were to move to a division rival. Flyers Purgatory says, you don't fix screwing up the offseason by trading your only true stud prospect, and said, who in God's name saying Middleton is a penny pincher? I really would love to know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Is Middleton putting restrictions on Dombrowski or not? Because again, Dombrowski has lit farm systems on fire in the past to try to make a big move. He hasn't done that here. So either he's like wised up over time, or is there a possibility here that ownership has said, I've already spent enough money. I'm not willing to go much further than this. The guys that you've talked up to me being, difference makers really haven't been. Let's see. Amadeo asks, what Phillies prospect has become a stud? You can easily replenish the system while remaining competitive. Stop being a bitch, Middleton. Wow. Getting people turning against John Middleton. I don't know how I feel about that. Some anger in the crowd about young John Middleton. I'm actually going to put up a poll really quick. Now, we are going to move off of the Phillies conversation here because this is due in large part to the fact that, between now and if I do a trade deadline day show or we wait until Friday's show or whatever, I don't want this to be like a totally useless conversation, and I don't want to go too far, right? But my question on the poll is going to be simple. Should the Phillies trade Andrew Painter? I am just going to leave it at that. Should they trade Andrew Painter? And obviously the implication there is going to be for an impact player, impact bat, impact bullpen arm, or should they just not trade him at all? Because I'm sure there are people out there right now who are like, under no circumstances do you trade Andrew Painter. It's just interesting. Very, very interesting. Let's see. Amadeo, who's back on this Middleton thing, says he lies through his teeth and tries to save face with the fans. His interview last season at the deadline was exactly that. Whew. Amadeo, man, coming in with the fire for Middleton. Catholic Nono says the only issue with Kwan is that he's a lightweight. You need a bopper. If it's a right-handed power bat that you can get, sure. If that's not really available, I'm fine with a guy who's just going to get on base. That's not a big deal. In fairness, it's something that they don't really have a lot of, right? As of right now, on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel, the poll, right now we're at 62% say yes, the Phillies should trade Andrew Painter. If you're opposed to trading Andrew Painter, it's time to get into the chat, into the poll, and placing your vote. All right, so that is it for right now on what's going on with the Phillies. I hope that by the trade deadline, they make a move. If there's a big move made, I'll do an emergency show. I'm going to make a call on Thursday's show tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to do the trade deadline or Friday. I don't think I'll do both, right? Because if they don't do anything, I'm going to be angry in the moment. If they do something, I want to be happy in the moment. And I don't expect a lot of non-Phillies trade deadline news to happen by Friday. So I think there's a good chance that we'll do a trade deadline show and no Friday show, but I will keep you posted. You just have to stick with the socials and over on the YouTube channel in the community tab. I'll post an update there. Peter Tom Willis says, yes, long trade deadline show. I don't know if I could do a long trade deadline show. We did that 2-hour marathon. Was that last week about the Carter Hart trial? And I was like, oh my God. By the time we got done, it was 2 hours. I just didn't have much left in the tank. We'll see about tomorrow. I'm going to close the poll. 55% say yes, they should trade Andrew Painter. 45% say no, they should not trade Andrew Painter. All right. I'll keep you guys in the loop. We'll figure out tomorrow. Now, there are a couple of other things I want to get to before we head out. I said it was going to be a shorter show, and I'm kind of telling the truth. There were a couple of things that happened. Let's see. A couple of Eagles-ish related things, and then a big media news story. So I'm going to go to the Eagles stuff really quick. I don't know if you guys saw this. You may have. You may not have. The Pope might not be a Philly guy after all. You heard me right. We all know that the Pope went to Villanova. We know that he was a Chicago guy, but he went to Villanova. And so we have all kind of been holding out hope. The Pope is a Philly guy. We're going to be able to embrace him fully. All the people are like, Villanova's not a city school. All those people were kind of like, hey, it's kind of cool that the Pope is putting on a Villanova hat. Archbishop Perez, the Archbishop of the Philadelphia Diocese, right? If you're Catholic, you get this. If you're not, Nelson Perez, former priest at St. Agnes in Westchester. He was a priest there when I went to Westchester University. This is kind of cool. And had become the Archbishop. Pretty neat. He went over to the Vatican. And he tried to hand the Pope a hat. And the hat that he tried to hand the Pope was not a Villanova hat. It was an Eagles hat. I want you to watch what happened here. Pope Leo, we've been in good graces, and we like Pope Leo, we think. He's been a Philly guy. He put on the Villanova hat. Here's Archbishop Perez from Philadelphia handing an Eagles hat to the Pope. Let's see how it goes. Nice handshake, good handshake. We don't know what they're saying. Smiles, we love the smiles. And then he's, okay, we can't hear it. We don't know what he's saying, but good little back and forth here. If you put your ear to the ground, there's a thought that maybe Perez can end up over the Vatican at some point. Not as a Pope, but he gives an Eagles hat. All right, so we have a transfer, right? We went to the two hands there with the Pope. Let's go back here. We don't have the telestration here, but let's go a little slow-mo. All right, so Perez hands off the Eagles hat, puts it in the right hand first. Pope grabs the bill of the hat, and then we see the look down, a smile, not disgust, right? We know that the Pope, Chicago originally. Is he really just a Bears fan? Does he embrace the Philadelphia of it all as a Villanova grad? Now he goes to both hands, returns the eye contact to Perez, switches to the left hand. We got a handshake. Handshake there. Looks pretty firm. All right, let's keep going. Handshake. He does not put on the Eagles hat. Now, again, there was no disgust. There was no, how dare you hand me the symbol of Satan, the Eagles hat. So we have avoided that. He doesn't exactly say, love the birds. We don't get the Pope turning his head to look at the camera with a go birds. I can't tell here. I don't think Perez said, can we get a go birds for the folks at home? But a nice smile. And then he hands off the hat, which is what the Pope usually does when he's handed something. You have a moment. Now, in the rare moment, like he did after just becoming the Pope, he puts on the Villanova hat. Is the Pope a Philly guy? 610. I'm actually going to go over really quickly. I need to know in the YouTube poll right now, does this mean the Pope is not a Philly guy? I don't know how to feel. Because at this point, we've seen him put on a Villanova hat because he's an alum. He did not put on the Eagles hat. He also didn't look disgusted. Is the Pope a Philly guy? It's now in the poll. Yeah, I know how stupid it is. Yes, I know I mock these kind of polls online, but it's just part of the engagement here on YouTube, on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. Is the Pope a Philly guy? Oh, we have votes in both directions. Oh boy, people have thoughts. We'll go over to the comments here really quickly, and then we're going to keep going. Let's see. JH says, wow, hashtag not my Pope, hashtag I didn't vote for him. JH also says divine intervention will prevent the three-peat, it looks like. Amy thinks that the Pope looks polite. He smiled. Hexram says, no, the Pope is not a Philly guy. I'm about to close the poll over on the YouTube channel. It's a very short poll. 62% of respondents say, no, the Pope is not a Philly guy. Uh-oh. Okay. That was that. Now, there was one other Eagles-ish related thing that I wanted to get to, and then we have the media point. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, right, we were talking about the people who were getting laid off and the shows that were getting canceled over at Fox Sports. And one of the people whose name popped up as somebody that, they think is going to remain at Fox Sports, at FS1, a guy who it seems like the network is high on and network execs are high on, is Danny Perkins, who was part of one of the shows that got canceled. But it appears as though he's going to remain there. Now, Colin Cowherd's been out, I think, the entire week with his show thus far, and Danny Perkins has been sitting in for him on Colin Cowherd's show, The Herd. He made a little bit of news because he actually saw the ranking of Jalen Hurts as the number 9 quarterback in the NFL, and he actually put Hurts in at number 10, which was egregious, and I didn't shred here. I could, but I didn't. We're going to do one really quick reaction here to Danny Perkins because he revealed his top 10 teams in the NFL. Some of it may come as a surprise, but I only care about the last 10 seconds of what he had to say because he named 9 other teams, and then he got to his number 1 team.
Season, the Philadelphia Eagles are the best organization with the best roster.
That's it. That's it.
Xavier Worthy played 0 snaps.
He actually does have a part where he goes into a little bit more detail.
The best organization with the best roster.
That's it. Best organization, best roster. That's it. He has them as the number 1 team in the NFL. So if you were sending hate mail to Danny Perkins for his thoughts on Jalen Hurts, at the very least, he's got the Eagles listed as the top team. It does feel like there's a growing sentiment now among a lot of national pundits that the Eagles should be the number 1 team on the power rankings, coming in as the reigning Super Bowl champions. Interestingly enough, I've now seen a few power rankings that have the Ravens ahead of the Chiefs. They have Chiefs at 3 and Ravens at 2. I think that's kind of a hard pitch to make. We'll see. Now, last thing. It's a media note. If you recall, Shannon Sharpe leaves FS1, eventually lands on ESPN. Shannon Sharpe has a massive media presence of his own. He's got his own shows, became one of the most highly sought after appearances, right? People wanted Shannon Sharpe on their show. They wanted to be on Shannon Sharpe's show. If you go back to the election, there's a whole thing with Kamala Harris about wanting to be on Shannon Sharpe's show, thinking that it would get her to a whole other audience and that he was a very influential media figure. Eventually, he lands with ESPN, and then he's on First Take, and there's this kind of growing profile, and then things kind of come to a halt as an ex-girlfriend of his filed a lawsuit accusing him of a horrific thing that starts with R and ends in, well, you could kind of figure it out. Not good. So this accusation gets made. A lawsuit gets filed. Shannon Sharpe, remember, goes on the offensive, talks about how these claims are, they have no merit. And he releases some of the text messages himself, and legal people are like, holy shit, like what a kind of crazy thing to do, an ill-advised thing to do. News came out a couple weeks ago, it was a couple weeks ago, that Sharpe settled a lawsuit against this ex-girlfriend, or the lawsuit that the ex-girlfriend filed. He settled this lawsuit after claiming that there was no merit to her claims. He settles 2 weeks ago. And now ESPN has decided to cut ties entirely with Shannon Sharpe. It's a story that was broken by The Athletic, Andrew Marchand, who's always at the forefront of this stuff. When we talk about media news, Marchand is the guy who typically is the one who leads the way. But ESPN parts ways with Shannon Sharpe following the settlement. You can see it there on the screen what the accusation was. But he's been off the network since late April, which is when the suit was originally filed. She was looking for $50 million for pain and suffering, psychological and emotional distress, mental anguish, embarrassment, and humiliation. He denied the claims. Remember, he said it was a shakedown attempt. His attorneys came out. It was a very public thing. And there was a whole thing about how Stephen A. Smith kind of addressed it on his own show. And there were thoughts of is Stephen A. Smith going to try to strong arm the network into keeping Shannon Sharpe around? Was there a possibility that something would happen that eventually was going to lead to kind of an irreparable relationship issue between the network and the talent? Because again, Sharpe has Club Shay Shay and has Nightcap. They're huge shows. They have a massive following. He is viewed as one of the most important media figures in sports media. And it seemed like an absolute win-win for ESPN to go and take Sharpe away from FS1, effectively ended the Undisputed show. It effectively took Skip Bayless off air, right? Skip Bayless could never find anyone else to make that show work with. It took out really the most notable show, probably, right? At least from a debate perspective that FS1 had. And they got to bring him on and give him that national notoriety on ESPN. It kind of felt like a win-win. And now, done. Now, Marchand also put out, before the lawsuit became public in April, Sharpe was apparently closing in on a major podcast deal that may have been worth as much as $100 million, the sources told The Athletic. Pretty wild. So now, Sharpe is out at ESPN. Can't imagine that he's going to go back to FS1. I don't know how FS1 could do that, especially with the allegations, right? And if you go back to what happened around Joy Taylor and what happened around some of the executive stuff and some of the other talent that were involved at FS1, it'd be kind of hard to look at that, not renew her contract. You're canceling a bunch of shows. Could they theoretically get a boost by bringing Shannon Sharpe back to FS1? Maybe. Would it be worth it? I don't know. Where does Sharpe go now, right? You can't imagine that a Fox or an NBC or a CBS would look to bring him in even for Sunday coverage, right? Where does he go? Is it possible with ESPN kind of coming to that agreement for Red Zone and for NFL Network? Could ESPN kind of sort of still have him on payroll, have him go to NFL Network? If it's not a full-on acquisition of NFL Network, could NFL Network sign Sharpe, have him on a daily show, and it just so happens that ESPN benefits from his presence there? I don't know. I just kind of wonder what's going to happen there. It's very, very interesting to me. It's going to be something that we'll keep an eye on. I can't imagine Shannon Sharpe is done. I can't imagine that Shannon Sharpe is going to be done in sports media. I find it really hard to believe that would happen. Hexram, by the way, says Mets get Tyler Rogers from the Giants. Okay. I haven't seen anything yet about a trade for Luis Robert. I saw that people were getting really excited about the idea that he could get brought into the Phillies. It looks like nothing's happened there yet. Okay. Last thing. JH, you'll have to reach out to me. Shoot me a DM about this. Says, I have a media story I hope you'll chase down if you have free time. All right, let me know. Would love to see what's going on. I like chasing down a good media story. All right, now, I will be back either Thursday for an MLB trade deadline show or maybe an emergency show, right? If Dave Dombrowski actually does something of value, I'll come back with a show to recap the Phillies' big move. It's possible that we'll forego a deadline show and we'll just do a regular Friday show. I'm not sure yet. So keep an eye out on social media. You can find the Russ Joy Show over on X, Facebook, YouTube, in the community tab. I'll put an update there. You can find me on Twitter and all of your appropriate platforms at Joy on Broad. You can find this show over on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And you can find short form content from this show done by Video Guy Amadeo, done over on TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts. It's everywhere. If you can, like those videos when you see them. If you can help right now, your number one way to help on YouTube is to like the video. Sends a good signal to YouTube. They love that. So like the video, share the video to a friend, a family member, an ex-girlfriend, whoever. Share the video. That's also a good signal. And subscribe to the channel. And if you want, you can ring the little bell to get notified whenever the show goes live. This was the first time in a very long time that I didn't even set a way in advance kind of notification that the show is going to be going up. We set it live right away. We had a nice little audience here across YouTube, Facebook, and X today. So, big thank you to everybody who joined me. Until Thursday or Friday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to all of you soon. Let's hope Dave Dombrowski does something of value. Maybe. Bye now.